Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to I can't say it. Welcome to Stitch and Twitch Tuesdays. I'm so happy to be here with all of you, even if I'm tongue-tied today and a little bit, all over the place. But I'm delighted to be here with all of you. Monsieur Gâteau is here. I know you're very excited too. He's thrilled because, of course, sewing time means treat time. Look at that. He's like, I don't know if he's trained me or I've trained him, but I know the drill. It is treat time. There you go, darling. I try and limit him because he will eat all the treats and then he will be very ill afterwards. So we have to be, sadly, we cannot just give him everything he wants. Hello, Bess. It's so good to see you. Hello. Welcome to Tuesday night. I'm so happy to see you here. I am still noodling away with the rain capes, and I can see the end in sight, but I took like a little break, not really, but I needed to work up the pattern adjustments for another project. So I was doing that earlier. So I haven't really done much more than the last time we were together. But what I have, oh my goodness, Monsieur Gâteau. No. Actually, I say that and I can't remember where we left off. Hello, Ty. It's so good to see you. So I've sewn together the linings and they're hanging, draping, allowing that hem to drape out a little bit, stretch out a bit. So when I go to sew the shells of the lining, that all of that stretch has happened, and hopefully I'll be able to justify the hems without too much issue. So far, I found both fabrics fairly easy to work with. So I'm lining these rain capes in a beautiful sort of medium weight cotton. It's a quilting cotton. It's just gorgeous. It has a very buttery hand. It's a William Morris print, so I love the print. I'm really excited. And then the shell of the fabric is made out of Taslan, which I've talked about a few times. It's this fascinating synthetic fabric that was developed in the middle of the 20th century. And I'd never heard of it. I'd probably run into it, but I've never heard of it. I didn't know what it was. So I've been on a bit of a learning journey with this fabric. But it's great. It has a wonderful hand to it. It's got sort of like this beautiful nubby texture that reminds me of some other fabrics, the name of which just went out of my head. Not very helpful, brain. But it's got just like a lovely, not quite crepey feel to it. Has a nice drape. You can see it makes these soft, beautiful columns of, pooling fabric, so that's really nice. It doesn't really take much of a press at all. It will not firm a really crisp pleat, for instance, but it would probably work lovely if you needed to make water resistant ruffles. So, Budgie, Ty, I'm so happy you could at least pop in. I know it's quite late for you on the East Coast, so I'm always happy when you can jump in. Hello, Becky. Welcome. We are working on a rain cape that I'm sewing up for our trip to the United Kingdom and Ireland, places where it rains routinely. So I'm really excited for these rain capes. I'm making two identical rain capes, one for me, one for the Grand Arbiter, very matchy. I love this green color. And so the outer shell is largely sewn together, but the fronts are not sewn to the backs yet. So that is a step that's coming up. But before I can do that, I have to install a little facing, a little interfacing for the front openings of these rain capes to reinforce the area where I'm going to be putting in buttonholes and buttons. So especially with the Taslan, I know that it needs reinforcement. Yeah, thank you. Becky says she loves the green. Thank you very much. I'm very into this shade. It's giving me sort of load-in vibes. I picked this up on Mood Fabrics, and I have to tell you, it is not like super inexpensive. It wasn't terribly spendy, but it was not the cheapest option. I went with it because the other water-resistant fabrics were very plasticky. They had a fairly unpleasant hand to them, and the drape was not that nice. And so I was like, oh, well, I'm going to try this fabric. I'm going to give it a whirl, even though it's like a little bit spendy. So far, I've been quite happy with it. Taslan is so interesting. It's really, really interesting fabric, but you can see it just looks properly like fabric and not like plastic. So that's very nice. It's made out of nylon, so it's not polyester, but it's definitely synthetic man-made fabric. And when pressing it, you do have to take a lot of care because you don't want to melt the fabric. So I've been pressing it on a synthetic setting and also using a pressing cloth to help me out with the pressing. That said, when I go in and press this fabric, I must tell you, I've pressed all of my seams as I've been going, which is good sewing practice. I'm going to show you the inside of these Taslan seams. They've been pressed open and flat, and that's about as much as I'm going to get out of them. I've pressed them both sides. They just don't want to be super crisp. That's all right, because this is meant to have some flow to it. It's meant to be drapey. And at least I was able to get a bit of pressing in, which is like the critical thing. So, but today I hope to put in a facing on the front edges, as I said, and then sew the fronts to the backs so that I can have the outer shell ready to also hang and drape out a little bit. So Becky is working on a quilt right now, but needs to make some new things for Chromis. Becky's character, your wonderful steampunk character, whom I got to meet at WestCon this year. That's very exciting. I like to think about my garments that I make as part of the story of my character. So I always think about how they play with that story, how they enhance that story, how the story of the character might drive the choices of what I am creating and wearing. So for Madame Askew, for me, obviously it's very easy. I just need to always be over the top. So hello, Joanne. Hello, my friend. I'm still sewing away on the rain capes. So I will be writing this up at more length for Patreon. Hello, Culture Shock. You are also always extra, always. And I love that about you. So let me show you, for those who are like coming in, I'm talking about these capes as though you know exactly what I'm talking about. So this is the pattern I'm using. It's a simplicity pattern, 8263. And it's a wonderful little pattern, sadly out of print, but if you find it secondhand, uncut or mostly uncut with all of the pieces still there, it is a really versatile little pattern. The way it's set up, you have some options for how you can mix and match the design features. And so I'm very happy. I've made this up before in the past, not for a rain cape, but so still for a cape. I love a cape moment. So Shark says, I'm literally making a cape and poncho for a costume right now. This is very exciting. Are you doing it out of waxed cotton by any chance? I really want to make something out of waxed cotton, and I had to give it a pass for this project because I didn't have time to make my own waxed cotton, and the colors available at the price were ridiculous. Like, I know a lot of labor goes into making your own waxed cotton, but if I'm going to spend that much, then I want more color options than I was getting. So, and none of the colors were working for me. So I'm, for those who are just coming in, I'm working with a synthetic fabric called Taslan that is made out of nylon, that has a fairly dry hand. It's got a little bit of a nubby texture. It's a beautiful drape. It makes these gorgeous like cones, very soft. Ooh. All right, so, okay. So Culture Shock says, I need to design the cape still to accommodate a jetpack. Very exciting. And the ones they're making are dyed muslin and linen because Culture Shock wants a ratty looking cape. Okay. And he's thinking of a deep purple with V plunge in reverse. Oh, ooh, that sounds beautiful. Oh, that sounds so good. I love that. Also, I'm a sucker for purple. So, all right. So today, I'm going to at least be putting in my facings. So I've sewn together. This is the front panel, half of what goes over your arm and shoulder. So front side panel. And it will sew right along here to the back, which also has a back panel and this back side panel. So it's very symmetrical. We've got a nice little neckline here. I'm going to be doing the standing collar. I'm still debating some details about the standing collar. So normally this is a place where I would use a little fusible interfacing. Woven fusible to give it a bit more toothsomeness, a little bit more body, so it be a little bit more rigid and stand more at attention. But I don't know how the fusible is going to fuse to the Taslan. So I am going to have to experiment a bit. If it doesn't fuse well in my sample, then I'll probably flatline it with cotton muslin, which is what I'm going to use for the front facings, where I'm going to be putting in my buttons and buttonholes. So these are things to think about. I also am pondering, this is like the mad idea, I'm pondering making piping out of the Taslan and piping the collar. Oh, all right. So, so Culture Shock asks, what do I recommend for a very rigid interfacing? They need a ton of structure for the vest. It has to stand up to having plastic plates riveted to it. Okay, so I probably have a couple of suggestions here, actually. I might go with a couple of layers of really sturdy canvas for this, especially if you want the vest to still have some breathability to it, and still have still have some, like, you know, softness to the wear. Also, I feel very seen right now. So Bess knows me so well that I'm considering doing piping out of a weird synthetic fabric for a minor detail in a raincoat. Yeah, I know. I have a problem. Okay, so, oh, all right. Culture Shock says, I already have 4 layers of wax duck. So the duck, if you do several layers of the duck cloth, it may actually hold up to the rivets because, you know, I'm able to put grommets through corsetry couture and put a lot of tension on them, and they are fine. My corsets go through perdition and back, and they survive. And usually the grommets are the last things to fail. So I think you could get away with doing a really good sandwich of several layers of canvas. I like to use couture for corset making because it's very stiff, very tightly woven fabric, but it is like thinner and more has like a nicer hand to it, less rough than, let's say, canvas. But they have similar properties. The other thing about couture that makes it really ideal for corsets is that it is herringbone weave versus plain weave. So normally with canvas you get plain weave, 1 thread over, 1 thread under sort of situation, and it's like it's plain because it's common, not because it's somehow undecorative. It's just like your bog standard weave, and so it can have some stretch on the bias, which couture will not really have stretch. So this is why couture is perfect for corsets, but canvas could really work well in this sort of setting. Oh, okay. Oh, all right. So, Culture Shock says, I'm doing grommets on the sides to lace it up the sides and using Chicago screws to attach the plates. So, may I give you some additional advice? You don't have to take it, but I'm going to give it to you and you can like ignore me. Please consider putting in at least 1 row of boning next to where you're grommeting for the lacing. I tell all of my corsetry students to put a sandwich of boning on either side of the grommets. It helps stabilize the grommets. It also keeps them from stretching the fabric as much, and it really reinforces that area. So, of course, I don't have a corset handy, but it's essentially that you have a lot of options for how you do this. You can either, in your case, I might actually recommend getting some boning channel tape and just stitching that in to either side of where you're going to put your grommets so you don't have to create boning channels. But if you're feeling pretty comfortable with that many layers of fabric, the canvas is sturdy enough that you can just stitch in boning channels. I recommend I usually do like a combo. This is like a little bit complicated to describe, but I do a combo where I do a 1/2 inch bone on the outside, right next to the edge of the fabric, and then I do a 1/4 inch bone on the inside. You could just put it in a leather strip. You could, absolutely true. That would work. That if the leather is pretty, like I wouldn't use the thinnest leather for this, so you know I wouldn't use like my nice kid skin here, but you don't necessarily need boiled leather either. You just need leather that if you can sew through it, you should be fine. You could just do a leather strip. You want your boning channel to be snug but not so tight you can't get this is so off color. You don't want it to be so tight you can't get the bone in. So normally if I'm doing a 1/4 inch bone, I want like a 5/8 inch, no, not 5/8. I just want a 1/4 inch, so I want like 1/8 or 1/16 inch more width per the width of my bone. So a ½ inch plus an eighth, a ½ inch plus an eighth. Don't make me do the math. Apparently, I cannot do that in my head right now. So you just want a little bit of room that accounts for the thickness of your bone and allows the bone to be very snug in the boning channel. I have all sorts of tricks for how to do this. I'm sorry I'm not set up to show you those tricks. I have no idea if I have any old videos kicking around on the internet of me doing boning channels. I definitely have demoed it many times in my corset making classes, but there are 5/8 or 3/8. Thank you, Bess. Thank you, Bess. I'm so grateful. Yes, and you know where my Patreon is. So anyway, this is my really fervent advice, is put, sandwich your grommets between boning channels. And I have some like very strong opinions about grommet size for corsetry, but you don't need to worry about that in this scenario. You should do the grommets that work best for your look, because you're not using this as a proper corset to like cinch things. You just want it to like fit nice and be snug, right? So you're not going to be tight lacing things. Yeah. And then, right, you don't need to hoist the girls in place. Very good. So yeah, but really sandwiching your grommets, it's amazing. It will really provide a lot more longevity for the garment, because your fabric will not be able to stretch as you're pulling across the garments, and so you will not get as much wear, and the garment will last longer. So and thank you, Bess, for doing the math, because I simply could not. So I have these trying to fall on the floor. I have 3-inch wide cotton muslin strips, which I swear I pressed. They don't look like it though. It's fine. I'm just putting them in and then I'll press them again. So I'm going to be sewing this in to the wrong side of the garment, just to reinforce that area. 3 inches might be a little bit wider than I actually need, but I have a sort of 1.5 inch overlap. So I knew I wanted it to be at least 1.5 inches wide, plus a ½ inch seam allowance, which puts me at like 2.5 inches. And at that point, I just said, well, bollocks, I'm just going to do 3 inches because it's a little bit easier. I tore these strips, so they're very straight. They've been torn along the grain of the fabric, which is sort of a handy dandy thing about muslin. Often when I'm doing projects like this, I do a lot of, shall we say, serging of things together. But I don't want to serge here, in part because I don't want to add the additional bulk. Culture Shock, I'm so happy you'll be listening. Good luck with the seam ripper. Also, yes, if the boning around your favorite corset has boning around the grommets, yes, that is why. That is exactly why. So, and someday we'll be in the same room and I'll show you how to seam rip with a razor blade, and then you'll be you'll be cooking with gas, as they say. So I am pinning this fabric a little bit. The tasselin is a little woodgy. It's not like so woodgy that it's impossible, but it's woodgy enough that I'm like, feel compelled to pin things in a way I normally wouldn't. Also, I see that Culture Shock uses a snap blade. I'm so pleased. And yes, the seam ripper, Bess, is both the best and the worst tool. It is indispensable. And when you want one, you really, really want one. That's why I have like half a dozen in my workshop, so I can hopefully always find one. But like, I have found that like bodkins, seam rippers, and measuring tapes all like to disappear periodically. So it's really important to have extra. Ooh. All right. Oh my gosh. Culture Shock says Star Wars costuming requires removing so many pockets, collars, and rogue zippers. Ooh, rogue zipper. That sounds like such an adventure. The rogue zipper. But also, yeah, they don't like to have those they don't like to have those zippers and things visible. Makes putting on clothes very tricksy. All right. And I know they're very specific about where the pockets go. Okay. So I have pinned this in, which is very easy. It's on the inside or the wrong side of the fabric where it will never be visible, but it will make a really good base for where I want my buttonholes and buttons to be. If this fabric were even more delicate, I would have actually interfaced the interfacing. So I would have fused a strip of interfacing to the cotton. And when I get done, if I'm like, oh no, I think it's still a little flimsy, I can still do that because I know that my fusible will fuse to the cotton that I'm stitching in. So that's kind of a bonus. I'm going to be stitching this within the seam allowance. This is a modern pattern. So the seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch, which I find really hard to get used to because I'm so used to my 1/2 inch seam allowances in the historical sewing world. So I have to keep reminding myself it's 5/8 of an inch. But on the front edge, I'm just going to be stitching this in at like about 3/8 of an inch. So it's well within the seam allowance. And when I turn it into the inside of the garment after I've sewn everything together, you won't see this row of basting stitches. Oh no. Becky says I have a custom made seam ripper and no longer lose seam rippers. That I think this is the key, is to get a really nice one. And Beth says, I've never had a problem with small tools disappearing, but the new cat likes to get on surfaces he's not supposed to be on. So I foresee issues in my future. Oh, yes. So Monsieur Gâteau is napping at the moment, but he loves to knock things about and knock them on the floor and bury them under fabric because he likes to make a nest for himself, and he will sort of, when I'm not there to stop him, he'll start grabbing things around him and just pile my tools into this nest and sleep on top of it. I have to be very cognizant of what I'm leaving out unattended so that I, don't have him sleeping on unsheathed seam rippers, for instance. I don't actually want him to stab himself on my tools. So yeah, he's really the main culprit. Ooh, and scissors and rotary cutters and 3 yards of fabric. Oh my gosh, Becky, your cat loves to steal from the workshop. So Culture Shock says there are 4 RDHD makers in their house. Tools are in a constant state of movement and flux. He says, I'm so excited. Last week, we had a shipping container delivered to the manor so we can finally create some space and I can get my big sewing machine up and running. That's very exciting. No. Well, so Culture Shock says, I can't leave thread or pipe cleaner anywhere out or else my himbo cat will try and eat them. Yeah, some cats are obsessed with eating thread, especially, and it's so bad for them. it can be really dangerous. I feel so fortunate that none of my kitties tries to eat thread because it is a real danger. Becky, I love that this is, you're just describing one of your 7 kitties and their antics. Monsieur Gatto, as you know, I have 2 others. He's the main ringleader and culprit, although Captain Picard will absolutely come and like lie across my arms whilst I'm trying to sew. Not while I'm on camera, because he hates cameras. But when it's just us, he's like, now is my time. And inevitably, I will be sewing something so fussy that requires real precision. And he's like, now is my time, Mama. Also, what in the world? All right, good. Had a little knot form on my thread. So I just rethreaded my machine with a nice green thread that really matches the tassan. I just happen to have this in my workshop stash. I can't imagine why. It's not like I just made a massively green ensemble or anything like that, where I use nothing but green thread for the last 6 months. That definitely didn't happen. So, oh no. So Culture Shock says, I live on a farm. We have critters. But you have chickens and things, right? Hello, Argent Peacock. Oh my goodness. Let's see here. Becky says, I can't leave anything out. Clark, the thief, will steal anything and everything. She's a menace. Yeah, no, my goodness. I love cats, but also they can really be such a menace. So, all right, everyone, I'm going to just stitch this facing in. You can see, look, the tail's a little long. I just ripped fabric from a remnant of muslin I have that was long enough, and I didn't worry too much about the length because I can always trim after I've sewn it in here. It's just interfacing. It doesn't need to be like anything super in this case. So now I'm working on another project, a little fit and flare dress number from a pattern, a charm pattern. And for that, I'm using like a fancier interfacing situation because it's a fancier garment with fancier sewing. And also the places that need stabilizing are really complicated shapes. So I need the fabric to like be up for that and also not add a lot of bulk to the project. So Becky says, Loki, who you would think would be the mischief maker, just likes to sleep on my ironing board. I love that. Culture Shock says 6 cats, 2 dogs, 3 ducks, 5 tortoises, a turtle, and around 50 chickens. So you've always got eggs. That's amazing, including duck eggs. I love that. Becky's rounding it out with 7 cats and 4 dogs. You both are living the life with your menagerie. I love that. So I'm just sewing at 3/8 of an inch, straight seam. I'm doing 2.5 millimeters stitch. It's, very bog standard sewing here. And as you can hear, I'm going like all out speed-wise. If this were not going to be bag-lined, I would handle the interfacing differently. If this is bag-lined, the interfacing is going to be entirely hidden. And I'm pretending not to be a gremlin on the internet, so I am remembering to take my pins out as I stitch. Always a bit of a problem for me to remember, and something I really work on because it's better for your needles long term. A good machine is not going to be like destroyed by sewing over a few straight pins, but long term, it's better to like not sew over them. So I try and be very careful. I try. The operative word here is I try. So I've just sewn this in, straight little seam, 3/8 inch. This is my first facing. I'm going to be doing this to all 4 front pieces. Now, not the linings, just the shells. The thing is, I'm making 2 identical rain capes. So I'm like batch sewing. So I do like 1 step to all the pieces. And that means I'm kind of like constantly in the same order of operations with all the garments. So set this aside. I don't worry too much about wadding it up. I'm not like super crumpling it, but because it does not take a crease very much, it also doesn't wrinkle very much. It will wrinkle a little bit. This fabric is going to be really great for travel because it folds up very compactly. It's not very bulky. It's very lightweight, water resistant. There's a lot of good qualities about this fabric. The one challenge and the thing I'm like debating what I'm going to do that is really being impacted by the question of aesthetics versus function is waterproofing the seams. Do I need to? Will I? All of this has sort of been going through my head. If I were going to be in a place where I was dealing with really a deluge of rain all the time, I feel like I would absolutely need to to sort of waterproof the seams. I've looked at a few options. There are like 2 or 3 solid options for how to do this, using different chemicals that people in the outdoorsy hobbies use to reinforce the seams on their tents and such. And then there's this like interesting new development of a sort of water resistant fusible tape that you can fuse to the inside of the garment over the stitch line to create a little bit of a more waterproof seam. I was tempted by that, but of course, I couldn't find any reliable reviews from people who sew and not just people who are repairing seams on their tents. And I need to know how it works in a garment situation. And also the people who were using it and reviewing it, let's say they had some dodgy credentials. I was like, I don't know if I trust you to give me good information. I think you are repping for this company. Yeah, I definitely do need to do a test. Argent Peacock says you should test with small leftover scraps, see what holds up. Absolutely, 100%. The other thing is I'm putting a lot of effort into this. And so with the chemicals, which I think are probably the easiest solution, my big concern is that they will make a mark on the fabric that will be very obvious. And so I absolutely need to test to make certain that I'm not making a stain on my fabric after taking so much care with the construction. So that's on the mind. Also, like, will it stiffen up the seams too much? Will it impact the flow of the garment? All of these are things that I have to test for. The other option, and this is the more like garment maker's approach, is to actually cut bias strips of the taslan and sew them on the inside, attaching them to the seam allowance so that all of the seams are backed with a little strip of impermeable fabric. And so I'm considering that option as well, even though it's definitely the more labor intensive choice. So I don't know what I'm going to do, but I have to make a decision soon. And I have to go out to like an outdoorsy store to actually go see if I can procure the chemicals in question and a small amount. I don't need enough for a tent, for instance. So this is a challenge with me not being outdoorsy because I don't have any of this like on hand. It's just not something I would have in my stash. So I know that Bess recently acquired a beautiful Rain Sisters coat. And oh gosh, they look so smashing. I love the styling on them, and Bess's looks beautiful. The colors are so nice. The construction looks really good. And I'm very curious about how they handled their seams because their garments have impeccable styling to them. Like all of the seams look really nice. Everything flows really beautifully. So I'm like, what did they do? How did they do that? Did they use a chemical? Did they use a certain kind of thread? Is the fabric they use something that like sort of sucks in around the threads when you get to? I'm just very, very curious. Oh, so Archer Peacock says, I think it does come in smaller repair kits for waterproofing. My husband has a couple in his camping supply. That's very exciting. Oh, Beth says lots of top stitching. Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, now I'm curious if they have like done sort of a flat fell or some sort of like seam finish with the top stitching where they've like encased the seam underneath. Ooh. I mean, I don't expect you, nor would I, in your case, open up the garment to look and see how they finish the seams. But it does make me curious. So, depending, I may be facing the seams with more Taslan because I do have enough to do that, or I may be oh, that's the back, that's the wrong shape, yes. Or I may be using a little bit of this chemical. All right, Beth says the seams don't look different from regular sewing. Yeah, I'm like so curious because that's looking at the images and the videos and everything. There doesn't look it like anything untoward about how those seams are stitched. They look very standard to me. So yeah, I'm like curious how they did it. I want to engage in like espionage to see their seams. So I will be curious to see how everything holds up too for you in the rain because that coat looks stunning. Oh, seam allowances to one side then top stitched. You know what? That's such an easy solution. That's the easy solution. I like that. I would flat fell these seams, but the curve seam that goes from the bottom of the cape all the way to the from front to back, I don't want to try and flat fell that. But to like sew the seam allowance to one side, top stitch it, I can absolutely do that. That's not that labor intensive either. Ooh, Bess, you're so smart. What a great suggestion. I think that's we've got option number 4 has just entered the building, and I really like it. I'm very intrigued by this option. I'm gonna like see how it goes. Give it a try. That's easier than then going in, I think, and sewing bias strips over the seam allowance attached to the or over the seam attached to the seam allowance, which is a very Victorian solution to the problem. So, I like this. Yeah, this is really very clever. Ooh, I would be very grateful of detailed photos. Thank you. I'm not going to sell these or like try and, you know, reverse engineer the Rain Sisters patterns or anything like that, but I definitely want to copy how they are handling their seams for rain gear. That still looks very stylish, tailored, very nice. And also the fabric looks gorgeous. So thank you. Okay. 2 more facings to go. I'm almost there. Very excited. This is the kind of sewing where I'm very happy to be chatting and, you know, talking about process, because it's a lot of sewing just endless straight lines, which can get a bit hypnotic if you do enough of it. So I find that having conversation or an audio book is really essential to this type of sewing. So one of the things I considered when I was cutting out the facings for this was actually using a green cotton fabric, which I absolutely have somewhere in my workshop. And I have enough of it to do this because I used a dark green cotton for some of the facings in my recent Secret Tea Society frocks. However, it has absolutely gone missing, or it's folded up in some weird way. I went through all of my remaining fabric, which I have folded and stacked together from that project. And, you know, I was very meticulous with that because it had so many moving parts and so much piecing. I needed to keep everything very organized, very together. So I'm like, aghast that this green cotton has disappeared. But for all that I think is possible when I'm doing my buttonholes, that a little bit of the facing could peek through the stitching around the buttonholes. The lining is also very light in color, so I decided that it was not going to be a real problem. Now, if I were being very, very overachiever, I would bind these buttonholes. That would be like the niftiest finish. But there's no way in this universe that I'm doing that in the time frame I have for myself. It's more important to get it done than to have bound buttonholes. They're not impossible, but it's like doing miniature welt pockets. And that just takes time. And it's just fussy. So I'm capable, but I don't want to take the time or do the fussiness. If you do make something like this and you leave yourself more than 3 weeks to do it, bound buttonholes are such a beautiful detail. And if you've managed to do a welt pocket, you've learned the skills you need for doing a bound buttonhole. It's just taking it much smaller. Oh no. Also, you have to like handle the lining a little bit differently when you're doing bound buttonholes. Oh my goodness. How I just really love the spam. Love it so much. One thing I am so grateful for the ability to use this software that allows me to stream on multiple platforms so we can all enjoy our time together, but doesn't allow me to deal with the spammers. And they're always so predictable, trying to sell us views. My darlings, I I only want the people coming here who want to be here. I love hanging out with all of you because we're all enjoying the same vibes. We like the sewing together. We like the chit chat. I don't need bots or made up viewers. That sounds miserable to me. So, or worse, trolls. It's just not the vibe. All right. Last facing pinned in. Let me confirm. All right. Good. Excellent. Okay. I'm not really backtacking here because this is sort of like basting the facing in place, and everything's going to get sewn into different seams. Thank you, Bess. I appreciate it. So my latest quest in sewing, if I love this. Becky says, bot viewers seem so, just all the ick, as Chromus would say. Yeah, I think I understand the motivation that some people have. And certainly, like, growing an audience organically and a community organically is a fair amount of labor. But then it's honest and it's real, and you've connected, and you know that the people you're spending time with are, in a similar vein. You share community values, right? That's really nice. But platforms reward people for having more views. And so I understand that sometimes people feel very desperate for an audience and desperate for views. I'm empathetic, but also I think it's a bad idea. And I'm empathetic because I understand this is a response to the world we live in, but I still think it's a bad idea. And also, like, look, they're scams, they're scam artists. You don't know what you're getting into and the kind of information they're going to, like, scrape from you if you proceed in that way. So, yeah, not for moi. Also, I'm just like, why do you come here? We clearly never engaged. I'm just live, and we are very happily not bothering anyone. So I've got my facing sewn in. I did not finish this edge because I don't want there to be like a little lump where that edge is. I want it to be pretty flat. And as you can see, the muslin is pretty stable and it's not really fraying along that edge. Once this is internal with all of the lining and everything in place, then you'll never see that raw edge. It'll be sort of hidden, which I think is going to be very good. Let's see here. Oh, I agree with you. So Becky says, honest and real is the best. I love this. She says, I need to get past my own mental blocks, but I'm definitely going to be bringing my character Chromis into the interpersonal and social. It's just scary. It is scary. And also, there's a lot that comes with that territory. And it's good to think about what you are comfortable with and what works for you, and to have boundaries in place. So, one of the things I think that a lot of people learn about very quickly in this wild world is the importance of boundaries around all of this beautiful online community. And that's hard. So, anyway, I wish you luck. And if you need to chit chat about it or ask questions, these are the kinds of things we're very happy to discuss in the Discord. So, this may impact how I proceed with the garment a little bit. I have to think about what's going to work best for pressing the seams to one side and top stitching them. Do I want to do some of that now before I've sewn the entire front and back together? Do I want to wait until I have the entire front and back in one piece and then try and sew the seams flat and then top stitch? So I need to ponder that a moment, because I have this interesting construction. This is the back piece. You can see I've got my seam here. This is where normally you'd have a sleeve, but instead we have the extension that kind of turns this into a cape. It's the side back piece. And it makes this really beautiful curved seam on the inside, like so, which you can see I've really notched and pressed and everything to make it very nice. So part of me is like, oh, do I need to press that flat now? So this one, top stitch this one now, and then that way it's ready to go when I sew this long side seam. Or is it better to sew everything together, press my seams in the direction I need them, and then top stitch whilst it's all together, but before the lining is in place? This is very, I'm like pondering. I need to like make the decision in like, the next 2 minutes, really. So part of the trick, I think, is once I sew some of these things together, certain elements will be easier to fold out of to one side than the other. So maybe I do need to press this to one side and go ahead and top stitch these seams before I sew that shoulder and side seam together. Sort of inclined. Yeah, all right. So this is yeah. Okay, so this is great. I really appreciate this. So Beth says, in my coat, the lining is mostly free from the outer. That's my plan as well, except at the center front and hem and around the neckline. That's the only place the lining and the rain cape, the shell, are mostly going to be attached. Well, and the arm slits. And the princess seam is pressed to the center, front, and top stitch separately. That's good to know. And then Archer Peacock says, I tend to flat fell in small sections because it's easier to fit under the machine for me. I also hate flat felling, so I don't do it if I don't have to. That's fair. So I think I need to take you all over to the ironing board and do some pressing of this flat so I can top stitch these side seams before I do this long seam down the edge. So we're going to go on an adventure, everybody, and we're going to press. And look, I did not know if we were going to be doing any pressing tonight. I'd done a lot of pressing beforehand to like have everything at the right stage. And as you know, I'm a huge advocate for pressing. I think pressing is essential to getting a really good look on your garment. That said, this taslan does not really take a press very well. So it's actually extremely tedious to press. It takes much longer to press than cotton or linen or silk or wool or any of the natural fibers that I love to work with so much. That's kind of tedious. But we're going to do it because I think this is the right order of operations. Also, we may have to do some trimming while we're there. So I'm going to take us across the room to set up at the ironing board. Very exciting. It's all like it's on, it's set up, it's ready to go, but I have to move. Also, this is definitely an area in which I want to be sitting because the pressing takes so long on the Taslan that just standing and pressing for that long, I'd be so exhausted. I think when I did my seams previously, it took me like an hour to press all the seams, which is madness. These seams are not that big and they're not that fussy in shape. So it was pretty intense pressing. Right, here we go. You're getting a really excellent view of my arm. Let me go get my seat and then we'll get to pressing. So exciting. Yes, top stitching does mean less pressing later. Look, it is worth it. I think this is the right call. Bess, I'm so happy you said something and also helped me get there with my brain, which was definitely not making the leap. So thanks for being very explicit. I'd like to say this is a good example of how even when you're very skilled and you have a lot of experience and you know what you're doing, it's really easy to still like have moments where you're like, wait a minute, how does that work? What are we talking? What's the great option here? And it's so helpful to have a community of sewists with whom you can discuss how you're going to approach things, because then you can like talk through the pluses and minuses, the sort of nitty gritty. It's basically, I'm talking about having a really good sounding board. And I'm so appreciative that all of you are willing to do that when I'm like faffing about. Also, hello, welcome. Thank you for joining. I am currently working on putting together a rain cape. And so I'm at a fun stage where I've put in a facing and I'm getting ready to press my seams so I can do a kind of flat fell situation with them and to keep them water resistant. Oh, yes, I'm so happy you stopped in to say hello, Archie Peacock. I know it's so late and you have an early day, so please take very good care, my friend. And good luck with the cats who are ready to like give you the business. Also, this is so true. Bess says, the more you know, the more options you have, the harder the decisions become. That's it. Like, there's so many ways to approach things. And sometimes it's just a matter of opinion. There's not like, or taste. There's not like a best option. There's just the option you like so much. So, all right. Ooh, this is going to be, yeah, that's how I'm going to do that. Okay, that is how I'm going to do that. Also, this is perfect because I'm going to have to top stitch around the arm slits. So the top stitching is already going to be sort of part of the project. So finishing all of the seams in this way, not only will it help me with not needing to press more often, but it's going to make my seams watertight, great, and it's also going to give it a very crisp, clean finish. Oh, see, this is so nice. Becky says, I miss Bethan living with me because we could bounce ideas off of each other. It's the best, honestly. So I often have friends come over and my dear chums, and they will talk projects with me and vice versa. And so we, like about once a week, I do that with some of the local costuming friends, and we just always are riffing about our projects. I'm also fortunate to have this weekly adventure where I'm able to discuss projects with all of you, and our Discord where we often, many of us, talk through what we're doing, and if we, you know, need some feedback or we need a technique, somebody usually will know what we're talking about. So let me show you a little bit here. I didn't show you the sewing because it was very bog standard, but let's, oh goodness, let's look at this pressing a little bit. So I've trimmed one side of my seam allowance. This is all snipped. It needs to be snipped to be a nice smooth seam. I've got my tailor's ham here, and I've set this at a sort of medium heat for the synthetic nature of the fabric. And I've got my handy dandy silk pressing cloth here. I'm just going to, I'm folding my seam over the top of the other seam allowance, like so. I'm giving it a nice press. So one of the things when I was doing this before, I discovered the clapper was very, very important to this process. So if you've never used a clapper, they're not a requirement in your workshop, but the fussier the sewing is you're doing, the more precision you're sewing, the more seams you're dealing with, the more you'll like having one of these, because it helps reflect the heat back into the cloth. It gives you a little bit of a crisper press. And you can see, even though this fabric doesn't particularly like to take a press, the clapper really helped get it a little bit more crisp and manageable, which is what I want. So I'm going to be doing that to all the seams. Oh, so Becky says we still chat, she and Bethan, but he's on a night schedule and you're not. You're on a daytime schedule. That's, I understand. All of your crafty friends live at least 3 hours away. No, that's so hard. I do look. I know it's never as nice being virtual compared to being in person. There's nothing like being in the same room with people and spontaneously being able to hand them fabric and say, look at this, or beads, or whatever, and get that instant feedback and the wonderful like kismet that can happen when you're chatting with your creative friends. But also there's like the logistical aspects, right? You can't feel this fabric. You can't be certain that the color looks exactly the same for you on your screen as it does for me in my lighting in my workshop, right? All of that can make doing a virtual chit chat a little bit more fraught. But I am grateful that we can have these because there are times when the people you want to talk with, your crafty coterie, they just aren't close. And you can't have that beautiful conversation that is so helpful to a creative person. So, all right. Clapping away. So they're called clappers because you sort of clap them onto the fabric. You can also pound your fabric with them in instances where you might use a mallet to pound thicker seams. They're really helpful. I've only had mine a handful of years, so I've done scads of very fussy sewing without them. But now that I have a clapper, I am such a convert. I love them so much. They really help. Like, this is not as crisp as I would get from cotton, but it would not take a press at all, I think, without these other techniques. Oh my gosh. So Culture Shock says, I have cut fabric with a hammer on my anvil for a specific distress look. That's brilliant. Look, distressing is not my area of knowledge. I've only done the tiniest bit. And of course, I've talked with friends who do more because that's the kind of aesthetic they're working with for their costuming. And I know you like really go after the fabric sometimes with hammer and tongs, but also with a cheese grater. So it's like very helpful to have these tools. Um, Specifically used and abused. Well, and that's like the kind of cosplay you're doing, right? That's so good. I love that. Okay. So the other thing I had to consider here is that I've got this arm slit, not a sleeve, just a slit where my arm will come through the cape. And so I have to notch on either side of that so that that seam allowance can fall open to both sides of the arm slit, and the stuff I am flat felling can go in the proper direction. And I am cutting down the seam allowance just a smidge, about half of the seam allowance away on the side that's getting wrapped under the other fabric, just to make it slightly less bulky where I'm doing the flat felling, top stitching situation. I love having the combination of my tailor's ham and the clapper in this circumstance, because I am dealing with some curved seams. Also, the tailor's ham can help me like position some of the fabric so it's a little bit supported and falls a bit more the direction I want it to go. And then I clap, clap, clap. So these are all things that I didn't learn in a book. I didn't take a course. I didn't read a manual. I'm certain there are books that will, like step you through doing these sorts of things, like using the tailor's ham, using the pressing cloth, using a clapper, all of that. But I learned it from talking to other sewers and from having someone more experienced than I am share their knowledge with me. this is part of why I'm so enamored with passing along what I know, because I've learned things because people have been kind enough to, participate basically in an oral tradition of passing down skills. And so I feel like a responsibility to reciprocate by also passing along my knowledge to the next new sewist I meet. It's really fun for me to watch people like achieve their sewing goals and to like learn how to do new things. I love watching your garments come together. That is like not an exaggeration. I get such a thrill when I see people's garments that they've been, especially if I've given you like a tip or you've asked for a consultation or what have you. I just love seeing things come to life. It makes me so happy. So, all right, I've done the underside. Now, to be really certain, I'm going to go back and press from the top as well. I want this to be nice, as crisp as I can get it, given that this is a synthetic fabric that really does not want to take a press. I'm using steam, not a lot of steam, just a little bit of steam to help me with this, to try and encourage the fabric to hold the shape I'm trying to press into it. I suspect the Taslan has a little bit of stretch on the bias, but not a great deal. So I am expecting it to need at least 24 hours of hanging on a hanger before I'm able to sew it to the shell. But I have plenty of work before me with the flat felling, and so I'm not worried about running out of things to do tonight. Okay. Right, and as I'm going in, I'm making certain that everything is still going the direction I pressed it in, sort of finger smoothing it out as I'm going. Battered thing is a remnant, a sort of offcut from silk organza that I use for another project. I know it sounds incredibly bougie, but I love flatlining things in silk organza. It is less expensive than you think. It's not as cheap as like fusible interfacing. I'm not going to lie to you, but I buy my silk organza from Dharma Trading. I get it unbleached, undyed, just like this sort of natural color. And I use it to flatline all of my things that need to be very strong, very stable, but still fairly lightweight and thin. So I for like all of my very fitted Victorian bodices, but also this is what I used to line every one of those dragon scales I put on the front of the dragon costume. It did take me a million years. The scales are the reason why that costume took 9 months to make. The scales and the fact that I like sprained my wrist in the middle of making it. That was a real, that was an embuggerance, I'm not going to lie. So this year, I sprained my wrist last year in October, not last year, in 2024 in October. So a little over a year and a half ago. And it's my right wrist, so my dominant hand, which very, very difficult with the sewing. And so around Halloween, early November, the Grand Arbiter this past year started messaging me and being like, Are you being careful? You are not allowed to sprain your wrist again. That threw us off schedule last year and made everything really difficult. And you were so mopey the whole time. So I was also in the midst of teaching a class at the time. It was just like such a mess. All right. So piece 1 done. Onward and upward. So for this seam, I'm pressing it towards the sort of center of the body because I think I want the sleeve-ish area, the sort of cape sleeve area, for want of a better term, to still be a little bit softer and fluid. And so I'm like, I think that positioning the flat fell going away from the drapey bit and into the more structured bit is the right move. If you are wondering what a flat fell seam is, if you have denim on your body, if you're wearing jeans or dungarees, usually those are finished with a flat fell seam. And so you'll have that construction all across the garment. Those are done a little bit more formally than what I'm doing here. This is very like off the cuff. They make for very strong construction. It is the construction I use for making corsets, actually. Typically, if I'm doing a 2-layer corset, I flat fell all of the seams. It makes my corsets very strong and also very tidy, which I love. And once you know what you're doing, it makes construction faster, which I also really love. Now, if I'm doing a single layer corset, that's a whole different story and requires a different approach to construction. I do really love the single layer corsets. I've been making them more often because they're lighter. And when they weigh less, they're also not as hot to wear. So one of the big questions I get asked often about corsets is like, how can you breathe? That's like a very standard question. And I make them for myself. And honestly, no corset is going to make it hard for you to breathe, but a poorly fitted one will probably make it hard for you to take a really deep breath. But I can like sing and everything in my corsets. It's not a problem. And I went to opera school. So when I say sing, I mean sing, capital S. But the thing that I do find difficult with corsets is they get quite warm and it's around the core of your body. And I live in a warm place. So the temperature control is actually the big thing. So Becky says of the flat fell seam, that's one of the few seam types I haven't tried yet. I understand the concept, just haven't had an opportunity yet. Yeah, I mean, and also it's not the right seam finish for all garments because it is going to be a little bit more bulky. It's going to be a little bit more like stiff. Not necessarily super rigid, but you might be able to tell that that seam has a little bit of reinforcement, shall we call it. And if you're doing a flat fell seam, in my opinion, it should be in an area that you like either need that seam to be stronger or some other like practical reason, like maybe you're reinforcing it because it is a very sheer fabric and you have done a French seam but you don't like that seam sticking out. You want everything to be very smooth on the inside. The flat fell seam is a good option there. Maybe like me, you use it for corset making. It's a great place because just like your dungarees, your denim trousers, those things are going to be under a lot more wear and tear, and a flat fell seam is just stronger and will withhold more, will withstand more. So they're like really wonderful for those settings, but they're not necessarily something you need for your like average clothing. So I'm working on this beautiful dress and I'm very excited about it. And I would not be putting flat fell seams in it because it doesn't need that kind of construction. I am going to be putting boning channel tape in it though, and putting some bones in to reinforce the silhouette of the garment, but that's a whole other ball of wax. Okay, time for water. I'm having an atrocious hot flash right now, made much, much worse by sitting here next to the iron. It's always the way though, as soon as I'm like pressing or doing anything really like warm, that's when the hot flash is like, now's my opportunity. Not when I'm cold, not when it's frigid outside, only when it's like 100 degrees and I'm pressing things. It's the worst. So now I've pressed on the underside, time to press on the top side. Once again, I'm making certain that everything is still going the direction I want it to be going. My beautiful tailor's ham really helps with this. You'd see this seam is curved a little bit here. It's sort of curved. The curve starts out very much as though you were setting in a sleeve, and then it smooths out. Ooh, my goodness. So Bethan is going to be helping Becky make an overbust corset when she next goes to Nebraska. She says, I have, as Bethan says, wonky proportions and patterns require so much adjusting for all garments. Patterns do require everybody and everybody needs a lot of adjustment to get a really good fit in any pattern. That's very normal. Also, I don't know your measurements. I don't know your proportions as I have not sewn for you. But I've seen you and I've made a lot of corsets and I've taught a lot of corset making. You're not that wonky, to be honest, but you will need adjustment because no corset off the rack or out of the pattern envelope is really the right shape for any one person's body. Is like close in some areas. So they all need to be customized and adjusted. Very normal behavior. Has Bethan made corsets before? I'm assuming he has because he sounds knowledgeable. So if he has not, or if he has, but he doesn't have a lot of experience with overbust corsets, let me know. I'm happy to recommend patterns. I have a couple that I'm particularly keen on. None of them are made by Simplicity, Buckram, or Butterick, McCall's, or Vogue, however. I'll just leave that there. So don't do it. I mean, I guess if that's... don't want to be too mean or too like, I understand sometimes that's what you have access to and it's inexpensive, but you have to adjust those more than anything that is really made for corset making. Their corsets are all too big and they don't understand the ease requirements for corsets, so they make me absolutely cocoa banana fence. I'd rather start with something that's closer and I need less adjustment for. This is why we check. Did I not do that? Oh, I didn't do that. That's why I only... Oh, madam, it's fine. I just got so excited. I forgot to trim down the seam allowance and press the lower half under the arm slits. These are very small scissors. I like them for this kind of detail work, though. When I'm pressing and trimming things that are kind of small and finicky, it's nice to have some like scissors that are up for the job. Yes. Yes. I do know him as Paige the Colorful Dragon at Wild Wild West Con. Oh, you are long-waisted. Oh, yeah, no. I also am long-waisted. So even though I'm 5'3", I have to lengthen almost all of my patterns over the waist. Like the waist to shoulder measurement is never sufficient. So yeah, I'm used to that. Is like a standard adjustment for me. Normally, I have to add a whole inch to most patterns, even though I'm a very short person. I have super stunty legs. They're just, my legs are not getting me anywhere quickly. But here's the thing. A well-fitted corset looks great on everybody. But if you are a long-waisted person, corsetry is like meant for you. In that, I mean, you have more canvas to work with because you have a longer torso. And so it makes like, it gives you just more room to do cool things for corsets, which is really fun. I feel similarly about being long-waisted as I do about having naturally curly hair. In some circumstances, it's really wonderful and it makes certain things easier. In other circumstances, it is the bane of my existence and it makes life very, very difficult. So, all right. Are we good? Good enough? As good as we're going to get, perhaps? To do this side again. The upper portion just is not wanting to really like do my bidding. Okay. The other piece went so nicely, and this one is like, oh, I'm going to be difficult. All right. Be my butler, please. Oh my goodness. All right. The exciting part is the like trimming and the surface design. That's my favorite part. I really love the design phase and I love bringing that design to fruition. I don't love cutting fabric. I never like wake up in the middle of the night and like, oh, you know what I want to be doing? Cutting fabric. I do actively like stitching. I like the engineering of it all. That's all very appealing. I've even learned to really enjoy pressing, which is something I never thought would be the case. But here we are. Um, it happens. All right, so good. I've got a match set here. I love having a match set. Okay. That set is pressed and ready for top stitching. Put that to the side. Oh, look, I've only gotten 2 of the front pieces out of 4 of the front pieces pressed. This fabric really takes forever to press. You can see why I was like, I'm going to be sitting down for this because I need to have stamina to do all of this pressing. I probably won't even get done with the pressing before we hit the 2-hour mark on the stream tonight, to be honest. Oh goodness, let's see here. See. Oh no. What are we doing? No, no. Oh goodness. Sometimes, everyone, I love this platform, and sometimes I'm like, why are you being so difficult? So Becky says, that's how I feel about being 5'11". Sometimes it's great, other times, can I just get pants long enough? Question. Absolutely. Like that's the stuff, right? Like there's just some challenges. Um, oh, Bess says, yeah, poor Bess. Well, not poor Bess. Your corsets are gorgeous, but Bess says having space between your ribs and hips really must be nice. It is. It is. I honestly, I genuinely feel a bit like I'm cheating in this regard because of being such a short person and so long-waisted. But it is one of the few places that I really benefit from that turn of events. The other challenge I have, we all have these challenges with fit. So I have 2 other like specific challenges. I'm slope-shouldered, which I'm finding particularly challenging with the dress I'm making currently. And I have a narrow back. Now, the narrow back would not be such an issue, except I have a lot going on in front. And so it often makes doing certain kinds of fitting absurd. Like my pattern pieces frequently look ridiculous because the back is so very narrow. And then there's just like fabric for days to try and cover my huge tracts of land. Also, honestly, we learned a lot in our last workshop, which was about making a West kit, and also felt a little cursed at times. But having a sway back, that is a thing that I learned a lot about last time, and very tricky. But I applied some of that to my most recent fitted bodice for the green ensemble, and I was so happy with the way that knowledge helped influence the fit at the back of my bodice. It actively improved things. I had not realized that I too have this particular challenge. So sometimes we learn things as we are helping other people with fitting. So I'm going in, I'm trimming off this seam allowance a bit on the inner edge that's going to get covered, and it's curved and notched, so cutting it is a little bit more tricky. I can't quite go in my normal smooth line of cutting. That said, I am happy that I'd already notched everything. Makes my life much easier. Press, 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 press. Forever, for the rest of my life. This is my penance for some misspent portion of my youth, I'm positive. I'm not certain what I did to anger the sartorial gods this much, but I have been sentenced to a lifetime of pressing seams. So when I was first teaching myself to sew a million years ago, and the internet did not exist in those days. Difference engines had not come along quite so far. It was a long time ago. And I'd get these patterns, and I sort of relied a lot on Vogue patterns in the day because they would really teach you some great skills in their directions. Although simplicity, like the name suggests, is very accessible. Whereas Vogue will be like, and then you're going to stand on your head, do a cartwheel and a French knot while your arms are crossed behind your back. That's the only way to finish this garment. I mean, it would be like very absurd. Um, so, you know, like Vogue, I'd learned some skills on, but it would be sometimes very convoluted. And I wouldn't always understand why to do things. Also, yes, Joanne is right. I forgot wine helps with pressing. It's true. You know, the big problem is, Joanne, is I normally am sober while I'm doing this stitch and twitch on Tuesdays. And I feel like this is really an error on my part. I should have poured myself a little bit of wine. Okay, look, this one bit is refusing to go the direction I want it to. Get in there with that clapper. I'm going to make it our butler. Also, I think I need to top off the water in the iron. Oh, wine does help with pressing. So does a clapper, but the wine helps my attitude. All right. The good news is, once I do the fronts, I have to do the backs. But I might take a break, depending on where we're at, and go to the machine and show you how I would do this top stitching, just to demo that. Because I feel like we've had a wonderful chit chat, but I've just been doing the same thing over and over again. Which, by the by, if you're wondering, if you're learning to sew right now, that's very normal. Sewing is a lot of doing the same thing over and over again until you're done with the garment. Um, and as Joanne says, sometimes you need refreshment while you're doing it because it's very tedious. Do we remember? Are we? Yeah, we're still on. It's just, oh, it's such a cool iron. And I'm used to using a really hot iron on my, you know, cotton and linen and everything because it will take the heat. And silk especially is like, ooh, get me hot. I love it. Wool is a hussy for the heat and the steam. I love working with these fabrics. These synthetic fabrics are so delicate. They need a lot of gentle handling. You have to be kind to them. All right. Press, 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 press. And go in with the clapper. This is the process. Now, I also am making certain that I haven't sewn two of the same sides right when I'm supposed to have mirroring sides. So that's another part of like doing this pressing is confirmation that I did not make a really grave error and need to take something apart, which would be doable, absolutely doable. Do I want to do it? No. I'm very paranoid, however. All right, so let's press from the front. Sort of figure pressing things in position, going in with the old iron, heating up the seam as much as I dare, and clapping every seam. Every seam. It's fine. It's just tedious. So even if I weren't doing this flat fell treatment, I already did press all the seams exactly as you're watching me do now. It's just that I'm going in, pressing them flat, the one direction rather than open. And I would have to do all of this pressing regardless because it's the process. And it is, all right, look. Legitimately, Becky, I find it very boring. I need to be talking. I need to be listening to an audiobook. I need to be watching a tiny film in the background, something to keep my mind engaged, because I do find it very tedious. But it is incredibly important. It makes such a difference to the fit and finish of your garment. And after you've been sewing for a while, I think an experienced sewist eye can tell when you haven't pressed a seam. And sometimes it doesn't matter, it's not a big deal. Like if you're making tea tunics and chemises and like caftans and you don't press your seams, it's not necessarily that obvious or that big a deal. But if you're doing a really fitted frock, like a corset, like a waistcoat, like a fitted bodice, like a really nice tailored skirt or a pair of trousers, the pressing is just like so critical. And it's one thing I really want people who are getting into cosplay to know is that like if you are learning and you're wanting to like improve the look of your cosplay, you want it to look more professional, more sharp, then you really need to make certain you're pressing all the seams and getting them nice and crisp as you go along with your sewing. It just makes a huge difference. Becky says, I generally have music playing while I'm sewing. Yeah, look, we're streaming, so I can't be playing any of these things. I can't have anything going on because that would be breaking copyright, and I'm not interested in doing that. But normally I've got something. I love music, so I've got like my little speaker back here that plays whilst I'm working here, or like sometimes I'm listening to music and an audiobook. So yeah, Becky says, also quilts, you can tell instantly if you didn't press every single seam. I can well imagine that it is absolutely essential in quilting. All right, confirming. Sometimes the best way to confirm is just to hold it up to your body. All right, another match set. Good. I didn't make any like I didn't duplicate anything that I should not duplicate, so that's very good. I'm relieved. Okay, one more front panel to press, everyone. That's gonna get it done. If this was cotton, it really would press up in half the time. It would be going much faster. But cotton is not particularly water resistant on its own. I would have to have done waxed cotton, which I am desirous of doing. But as I mentioned earlier in the stream, as much as I want to experiment with waxed cotton, and I think it looks really, really nifty, I'm very curious. I want to learn the skill and everything. I also know that it takes time. Time I did not have for this project. So, also, I have no idea how waxed cotton would press up once it's been waxed. So it's like I'm going to have a big learning curve with that fabric. Once I have the opportunity to mess about with it. I see a lot of people doing these wax canvas bags. And I must admit, I'm tempted to do that as a sort of starter project because the scale is smaller than a cape. Oh, I understand. So Becky says, I absolutely love cosplay sewing, but quilting is the thing that balances the ADHD and the OCD. I understand that. I have OCD, and so doing really finicky garment sewing very much appeals to that part of my brain. So I think there's a reason why I do things like make corsets and do hat making, because it's very detail oriented in a sort of maniacal way. I think there's also a reason why I'm like, oh, let's do some pattern matching. That sounds fun. Those very fussy precision details just scratch a mental itch for me. I love quilting. I love how it looks. I am not a quilter. I have been enjoying Harvey Firestein's Firestein. Yes, Firestein's channel on Instagram, because he is a phenomenal quilter, and I always knew him as a phenomenal actor, and seeing his quilts is so stunning. He has a great energy about his discussion of his quilts too, but they're very beautiful works of art. They are also massive. I just cannot get over the way in which he's able to envision this design on such a massive scale. So if you're looking for someone to check out who's a quilter, anyone, I definitely recommend his work. He certainly does not know who I am, so he is not asking for my, accolades or promotion of him. But I just love his work. It's so gorgeous, really exquisite. He sort of does this thing where he repurposes a lot of scraps into these beautiful, complicated designs that are what we used to call a crazy quilt. I'm certain there's a better name for it than that. Oh, good. I'm so happy. 4 more seams to do, everyone. Like this. And then I can top stitch and move on to the next steps. I do really think this extra step of work is very worth it. And I'm glad I'm doing it. But my heavens, it is labor intensive. And maybe I'm being too precious with the fabric, but I really, really do not want to melt it. So I've been very good about keeping it in the right temperature setting. Sometimes it's tempting to try knocking the temperature up with your synthetic fabrics. And sometimes you actually do sort of want to melt your fabric for synthetics to like finish the edge or what have you. But in general, I try very hard not to melt my synthetic fabrics or to scorch them or anything else like that, because once you do it, there's no coming back from it. Oh, yeah. So, Becky says, I've never and will never make any sort of crazy quilt. I think they're gorgeous, but I just can't. Yeah, I think for me, I would get so hung up on like precision and detail and balance and symmetry. It can be really hard for me to just like let go in that sort of organic way. Although with my OCDs, people ask me, like, do you need everything to be perfectly symmetrical all the time? And I've explained to folks that either I need it to hit that symmetrical mark and be very precise, or it needs to be absolutely, obviously, intentionally asymmetrical, and you have to lean into that sort of chaos. I can't do the middle ground. Yeah. I'm so fascinated by quilting and the math and everything else that makes those beautifully precise pieced blocks come to life. I love that very dearly. The look of it is so satisfying. Yeah. And I have a wonderful machine for doing it, but I don't have time. I can either make garments or I can quilt, is the way I look at it right now. And so I make garments. All right. I know I look very, like, very focused, but I'm making certain that everything's aligned properly on the underside. There we go. Almost done with the fronts. It's very exciting. Yeah, yes, and yes, both garment making and quilting are very time intensive, and I love the garment making. It is my passion, so I sort of reside there. But I super admire quilting as an art form. The more I learn about it, the more I admire it. I use some techniques from quilting in some of my surface design and trims. Um, Quilters are very efficient in piecing. And I love the ways in which you can create wonderful trim effects by doing some interesting piecing. So that's a place where I dabble a bit. All right. So good. So we're almost at our time when I normally wrap up, and I feel like I'm not going to be showing you any of the top stitching. But so Becky says I'm a stay-at-home wife and I have quite a lot of time on my hands, so I sew. That is a very, very wise thing to be doing. I'm very keen. I encourage everybody to be into the sewing. I don't know. Everyone. I will take pictures of the top stitching and I'll post them to the Discord. Very excited to get to that portion. I have 4 more seams to press as I've just been doing. So it took me almost an hour to press the fronts of the capes to set them up for the flat felling. I suspect it will take me almost an hour to press the backs of the capes, as the seams are almost identical in length and shape. So it's fine, but it's tedious. And then I'll get to stitch and then I'll sew the shell together, and then it will drape overnight so that it's ready to be sewn together with the lining tomorrow. So very excited to be making this progress. I cannot wait to see these rain capes together, and I am probably going to pipe the collar like a fool because because why not? So it's been lovely to be with all of you. Hello, Grand Arbiter. It's so good to see you. Thanks for jumping in here and joining us right as I'm wrapping up. So my facings are in, and press the fronts within an inch of their lives. And yes, Grand Arbiter, I think I'm going to pipe the collar on the rain capes out of the green fabric. Won't it be sharp? It'll look so sharp. It'll look really nice. I just have to make the piping. That's fine. Won't take me long. The collars are not that big. It's just like I need to make probably 2 yards of piping. That's nothing. That take me no time at all, right? It'll be fine. Temperance is going to come over tomorrow and she's going to laugh at me, but it'll be fine. So, everyone, this has been wonderful tonight. Thank you so much for joining me and chit-chatting about sewing and all the things and creativity. That's me. That's true, Grand Arbiter. I'm famous for laying pipe in garments. So everyone, please take very good care of yourselves. Remember to treasure yourselves as I treasure you. Wash your hands. Use the great fabric in your stash, and remember to pour yourself a glass of wine if you're going to be pressing fabric for more than 10 minutes. Mistakes were made. I will do the second hour of pressing with a glass of wine. Thank you, Joanne. I'll see you all Friday night for our Friday tea. It's a very special tea this week. We're doing a fundraiser, or helping with the fundraiser to support Frenchie from Frenchie and the Punk. You can learn more on the event page or on our website or Patreon where we talk about it. Please help spread the word. We're very excited to help out these 2 wonderful musicians who are such incredible fixtures in our bigger steampunk community. So take care, everyone. See you Friday. Cheers.